A man who could not write his own name built the largest empire Europe had seen in 300 years. He was a man who founded schools across the continent and ordered the execution of thousands of prisoners in a single afternoon. On Christmas Day, 800 AD, a pope placed a crown on his head that would reshape Western civilization. He said he never saw it coming. This is the story of Charlemagne, the warrior who believed he was a healer, the king who became an emperor, and the man whose shadow stretches across 12 centuries to the world you are living in right now. In the middle years of the 8th century, when Europe was less a continent than a collection of bruises, a boy was born who would spend his life mending some wounds and opening others. His name at first was simply Karl. History would lengthen it. He came into a world where roads were broken and laws were local, and a memory carried more authority than parchment. The Roman Empire lay behind them like a half-remembered dream, spoken of with reverence but rarely understood. Kings ruled by muscle and lineage, faith ruled by fear and habit, and in the spaces between, men survived as best they could. Karl was the son of Pepin, called the Short, though not without irony, for Pepin had managed to lift himself from the mayor of the palace to the king of the Franks by force of will and shrewd alliance with the church. This was a practical arrangement. Pepin provided protection and the church provided legitimacy. Karl watched from his boyhood and learned early that power rarely stands alone. When Pepin died in the year 768, the kingdom did what kingdoms do most often upon such occasions. It split. Karl was crowned king alongside his brother Charlemagne. It was an arrangement made on parchment, not in spirit. The brothers shared blood, but not trust, and Europe held its breath, knowing how such divisions often end. Fate, with its lack of usual ceremony, resolved the matter. Charlemagne died suddenly, leaving Karl sole ruler of the Franks. He was not yet 30, but he would rule for 46 years. To speak of Charlemagne, Charles the Great, as later centuries would name him, is to speak first of motion. He was rarely still. He rode, marched, inspected, and judged. His court was not a place, but a presence, carried from town to town, monastery to monastery, across rivers and into forests where maps were more hope than fact. He was tall for his time, broad in the shoulder, with a steady eye and a voice that did not waste words. He dressed plainly, preferring Frankish wool to silks, and ate with restraint, though not without an appetite. Yet for all of this, he was no rustic. He loved learning, though he never mastered writing with ease. Letters came slowly to him like reluctant servants. Still, he surrounded himself with scholars and men who carried books as others carried swords. Charlemagne believed stubbornly, and with some justification, that ignorance weakened the soul of the kingdom. He ordered monasteries to teach not only prayer but grammar. He demanded that priests understood the words they recited. Latin, that old Roman tongue, was dragged back from the decay and made serviceable once again. Not perfect, but shared. Yet if learning was one pillar of his reign, war was the other, and bore it with such greater weight. For more than 30 years, Charlemagne fought the Saxons, a people of the northern forests who worshipped old gods and resisted the Frankish rule with a fury born of land and memory. Campaign after campaign rolled across their territory, burning villages, broken idols, forced baptisms, and the grim arithmetic of reprisals. At Verdun in 782, thousands of Saxon prisoners were executed in a single day. The act was recorded plainly without apology in the royal annals. Charlemagne believed order required obedience, and obedience, once refused too often, demanded correction. History would struggle to reconcile this man of learning with the ruler who sanctioned such a bloodshed. Charlemagne himself saw no contradiction. To him, the world was a body and disorder was a disease. He was the physician, and the physicians of his age were not gentle. His wars stretched in all directions. Lombards in Italy were subdued. Bavarians were brought to heel. The borders of his realm crept outwardly like ink spilled across parchment. By the final years of his reign, Charlemagne ruled a territory larger than any seen in Western Europe since Rome. And Rome inevitably came calling. On Christmas Day, in the year 800, Charlemagne knelt in the old St. Peter's Basilica. He had come to defend the Pope, Leo III, against his enemies. The church was cold, The air was heavy with incense. As Charlemagne rose from prayer, the Pope placed a crown upon his head and declared him the Emperor of the Romans. The moment was dramatic. Its meaning was less clear. Charlemagne later claimed surprise. Whether this is truth or theater, no one can say, but what is certain is that the crown altered everything. An emperor was no longer merely a king who ruled land. He was a symbol, a bridge between the fallen Rome and a hoped-for order yet to come. But symbols are burdensome things. They demand maintenance. As Emperor Charlemagne spent his days issuing capitularies, royal decrees, covering matters large and small, he regulated coinage, standardized measures, and involved himself in disputes that today would scarcely rise above village gossip. Nothing was beneath his notice. Nothing. He believed was beyond his responsibility. Yet even as he ruled, time worked its quiet sabotage. His sons died before him, one by one, victims of illness or circumstance. The empire he had built with such effort would not pass easily intact. Of all of his children, only Louis, later called the Pious, would survive him to inherit the crown. Charlemagne grew old. His stride shortened. Fevers came more often. Still, he refused softness. He swam in cold water. He hunted. He judged cases from his bed when he could no longer sit in the hall. In January of 814, Charlemagne fell ill. The court waited, and the empire unknowingly held its breath. When he died, he was buried not with the Roman excesses, but with Frankish simplicity, seated upright in the chapel at Aachen, a crown upon his head and a sword at his side. He left behind no perfect legacy. His empire was fractured within a generation. His laws were unevenly kept. His wars left scars that did not fade quickly. And yet, from the wreckage of his reign emerged an idea that would not die, that Europe might be more than a collection of quarrelsome kingdoms, that learning had a place beside power, that order, however harshly imposed, could aspire to something greater than survival. Charlemagne did not create Europe, but he gave it a spine. History remembers him as the Great. Those who lived under him likely remembered something else entirely, a king who demanded much and gave little rest. But greatness, like an empire, is seldom comfortable to those who bear its weight. And so a boy named Karl, born into a broken world, became a man who tried to hold it together with law, sword, and faith, never fully succeeding, never entirely failing, and leaving behind a shadow long enough for centuries to walk within.
If you enjoyed the video, please like and consider subscribing. These stories are kept alive when they are shared. Thank you very much.